This is Caroline from Caroline's Adventure. We all face challenges in our lives. How do some people take those challenges and turn them into powerful results? Join me as we dig into a story on resilience, hope, and joy, and uncover lessons we can each use in our own lives. But before we start, please take a moment to show that 5-star rating button some love, and follow while you're there to be updated every time I release a new episode. Now, before we begin, a word of caution. On this podcast, we regularly discuss topics like sexual assault, suicide, and addiction, which may be disturbing to some. Please take care as you listen. And if you need support in the United States, reach out to the crisis text line at 741-741.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good.
I have a cough drop in.
Okay. Well, you look nice.
Thank you. So do you.
Well, I cleaned my fridge today, so that's what I'm doing. So,
See, this is our third house that we've lived in with a smaller than average fridge. It's been a weird series of events where like we have this huge kitchen and they cut a smaller than average space. And so we've gotten really good at having like the bare minimum in a fridge.
well, that's good because I can't say I did an Instagram post on it. I have 2 refrigerators, and they were packed to the brim of mysterious jars and containers. And I had no idea what was in half of them because, I'm constantly experimenting.
That's so awesome.
And some it's like, okay, I'll put it in here and check the shelf life in a couple of weeks and this sort of thing. So anyway,
that is awesome though. I love the fact that you're just constantly alchemizing. You're constantly alchemizing, seeing what it is that's going to work. That's awesome.
Anyway, but occasionally I like to actually find something, be able to find that thing that I was testing. So anyway, there were losers and keepers, mostly losers, and now I've got 2 relatively empty refrigerators. I labeled everything, so I don't have mysterious jars and containers anymore. So the keepers all got labeled, so I know what they are. And if I have a guest, they can also find it and go, okay, well, that's the vegan sour cream. I can use that. So anyway.
I bet you have the most amazing conglomeration of things in your fridge just to go snack from.
Yeah, I'm not much of a snacker, but I am somebody who's got like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So if I need to throw together dinner, it's like, oh yeah, I've got that roasted garlic puree I can throw in, or oh, I've got the beet sauce that I made that I can use, or oh, I've got those I've got the vegan feta marinating in olive oil that I can throw into this. So I've got all I've got this, that, and the other thing, which I can just pull from and use when I need. So, it's not like, I don't know, I'll have leftover teriyaki sauce or a little bit of sushi vinegar or this, that, or the other thing. So most of it's good, and I can use it to recreate something new.
That was the amazing thing in Umbria was I can remember like getting back late that night. I was sweating because I'm like, what am I going to feed my kids? They,
Right.
It's been a long day. We're hungry. We're tired. And you had, I don't know what, 30 of us over for just an impromptu meal. And not only was it an impromptu meal, it was a phenomenal impromptu meal. You had the tiny little bitty kitchen. You had the tiny little grocery store to shop from in this little bitty, tiny little village. And you pulled together this amazing dinner party with just phenomenal food.
Well, I know how to cook from leftovers. It's a gift I was born with, but no, anyway, yeah, I couldn't let people go hungry that night. That little village that we stayed in on that trip, there were only 2 places to eat, and I think one of them was closed that night, if you remember.
Yes.
I can't remember exactly what the story was, but
I think we got back too late. We got back late at night.
Yes.
And everything had closed. And if I remember correctly, was it a Sunday? It was like some kind of a religious holiday because everything was closed.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
know the shop that I went to also closed. Like they weren't going to be home open in the afternoon, so I was like, I better grab everything right now. So in the morning. So yeah, it's feeding people is one of my joys, to be honest. So that was
Have you
and then
always been that way?
I've always been that way ever since I became vegetarian. I think from the time I was 12, I was on this quest to prove that you could have a great meal without killing animals. And then, when I became vegan, that became even more of a mission of mine. So,
What made you do the switch from vegetarian to vegan?
I was living in Japan in the 1980s, and I think I read an article about dairy cows, and I grew up in Marin County where there's a lot of dairies, and you're driving down the highway, and there's a beautiful field, and the cows are grazing in the grass, and they look so happy. And people used to say, yeah, you can only give milk if you're a happy cow. And there was a moment when I actually almost believed that. It's for some reason, it's the only species that can only give milk when they're happy. Whereas every other species, the way you get milk, the way you give milk is by getting pregnant and then having a baby. Like that's the only way an animal can produce milk. But cows are these magical creatures. All they have to do is be happy, and then milk just flows from their udders. I mean, but that's the myth that we're taught, and it's not
Yeah.
true.
Okay. Okay. That's, I
Yeah.
was going to say, I thought that wasn't true, but the way that you were
No,
saying
it's
it, I was like,
definitely not true. Cows need to be artificial. I mean, they're typically artificially inseminated in a dairy. And in fact, it's not a natural mating between a bull and a cow. No, the cows are forced into something called a rape rack, and then a man shoves his arm up there,
it is
and
brutal.
it's
Like,
brutal. It's
like,
absolutely
like
brutal.
before I
Yes,
was vegan, I knew it was
yes,
brutal.
yeah,
And,
brutal.
just growing up, um, in the mountains of North Carolina, there's dairy cows everywhere. And I don't even remember where I saw it, but I can remember the process and being like, I don't care how large her anatomy is, a man's arm up to the armpit shoved up inside of her has got to be awful.
Oh,
And
it's gotta be awful. I mean, they must feel violated.
yeah,
I mean, it's not a natural thing. And then they get hooked up to machines, and their milk is taken away, and it's not given to the calves because, of course, the calves are taken away. So it's a very unnatural process. There is no way that a cow can be happy. They are a far cry from happy. So there's no such thing. I mean, that is an absolute myth. The story of the happy cow. They
yeah,
are the unhappy cow
yeah.
that from whom you are getting milk.
It is interesting how, you know, growing up, there were so many untruths that I believed. And it wasn't until like I think I was about the same age as you. I grew up in a abusive household, and so I was always looking for ways to get out because if I was home, there was a strong likelihood my parents were going to fight and a strong likelihood that I was going to get some kind of abuse from my father. And so like I looked for whatever trips I could take, and there was a field of what I thought at the time was cows. I don't know, a couple of miles from my parents' house. It took me a long time to walk there, and then I would hang out with the cows for a couple hours, and then I would walk back, and that was an easy way to keep myself out of arm's reach. And so I would go down and hang with the cows, and I would go out in the field and I would scratch them, and it was kind of like my therapeutic escape. And I went down one day and the field was empty, and I didn't know the farmer. I'd never met the farmer, but I saw him up, and so I walked around to talk with him, and I was like, what happened to the cows? He's like, oh, we sent the steers to slaughter, but don't worry, we'll get another batch next spring, and they'll be back. And until then, I hadn't made that connection, and I don't know, probably 11, 12, somewhere in that age range. And that was my first
Hmm.
visceral reaction, realization that like, oh God, these animals that I've been loving on and spending time with, and
Hmm.
brushing the hair that was between their ears, and like they just got killed. And
Yep, got killed for someone's steak.
and it was I
Mhm.
went vegetarian just like
Mm-hmm.
vegetarian. And then it wasn't until like, I don't know, 8 years ago that I went vegan.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that the dairy and egg industries are so brutal. Like I ate dairy
Yes.
and eggs for a long time because I thought, oh, you know what? What's the harm? I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I chose not to educate myself on how harmful and how cruel those industries are. And once I
Yeah.
realized that, it's
We
my,
don't want to be educated,
yeah,
because it means we have to change our lives. We have to change who we are. And that's hard. So, we'd rather live in denial
yeah,
or in ignorance.
yeah. Well, and I mean, there's so much brutality um, in this country, but in humanity in general, that sometimes it's easier to not, it's one of those things where like once you start peeling back the layers, at what point do you stop and say, you know what, I can't go any deeper. This is the level at which I end. And it's hard.
It is hard, but there is hope. Humanity has evolved. I
Yes.
mean, if you think back thousands of years ago, I mean, we were brutal creatures. We didn't have a sense of ethics or moral anything. And today, even 200 years ago, I mean, we had slaves.
Yeah.
And now we realized we're beyond that, that we realize that human beings are all deserving.
Yeah.
And now we have to get there about the animals. But we are evolving
Yeah.
for
Well,
the
I
better.
mean, you look at like the way I've only been vegan for 8 years, but in that 8 year time frame, I've seen such a change and such a shift. I when I first went vegan, I my selection of products at the grocery store was them. Like your product line, I can remember when it hit our market because I started seeing articles advertising Miyoko's. I want to say the butter was the first thing that I can remember seeing. And I had no idea that it was even a person behind it. I just was like, oh my goodness, there's a butter option now. Before that, I don't, it may have been did Follow Your Heart predate
Well,
your,
they don't have a butter, but they had slices and shreds, and they had
okay.
mayonnaise. Follow Your Heart's been around forever. That's one of the OGs of the vegan movement. I mean, the guy who started it, I think he started Follow Your Heart back in the 70s or maybe the 80s. I mean, he's been around for a long time. Yeah.
It's amazing how like it, the number of recipes online has proliferated.
Oh, yeah.
And
Websites,
yeah,
influencers. Yeah.
yes. It's amazing. And it's for me, it's inspiring because it means that the more information I see out there, the more people that might casually dabble and then make
Yes,
a shift. And,
exactly.
and I
Hmm.
mean, I look at it as even if you don't make a full-blown shift up front, the more you dabble and the more you play in that space and you start to see, oh, you know what? It's not that I'm eating sticks and twigs and mulch all day long. It's actually really good food. The more palatable and the easier it makes that transition.
Hmm. Exactly, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the proliferation, what you're talking about, the fact that there are not just products, but there are influencers, there are websites, there are podcasts, there
Yeah.
are YouTube channels. I mean, none of this existed 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now it's everywhere in every country. And so, everyone's getting hit in the face with the concept of veganism. It doesn't matter if they're hardcore ranchers chowing down on their steak, at least they know what vegan is. And sometimes, I mean, sometimes ranchers even come to vegan cooking classes because they've been to mine. So,
That's really cool.
yeah.
Are they coming just to see what the options are, or are they honestly considering making the shift?
I don't know that they're thinking of making a ship, but they usually want to learn how to cook more vegetables. They want to learn, they're like, I realize I'm getting older. I need to reduce my meat intake. I need to know how to make yummy, vegan food. They're not thinking necessarily vegan. One of the things about veganism is that a lot of people who are foodies now are associating veganism with really unhealthy food choices, that highly
Ah,
processed foods.
yeah.
And so when in fact, the product does not dictate what the average vegan eats. I mean, most of us are eating plants. We're eating beans and whole grains and vegetables, and we eat most of us eat in a very, very healthy fashion. Only a very small percentage are the junk food vegans that are, chowing down on vegan hot dogs and burgers all the time.
Yeah.
But they've gotten so much press. Unfortunately, in some ways, it's backfired in terms of the reputation that vegan foods have. And so it's really important to really say, hey, no, that's not the case. It's all these beautiful dishes that are actually traditional in most countries. In most countries, vegan dishes were what people, the large percentage of people ate for hundreds of years, because meat was a condiment. Meat was something that you ate sparingly or rarely. And so the bulk of the food was already vegan. So whether it's Asian food or European food, like in Italy, like where we were
That was exactly what I was thinking.
Yes. I mean, a lot of the dishes we had that were traditional, those are just traditional dishes, and they just happen to be vegan.
And they were
No,
delicious.
they were delicious. No one was saying, oh, I have to create a dish that's vegan. No one was thinking that. They're just like, okay, we'll serve, this bean dish that we've been making for hundreds of years, or this vegetable dish that that's traditional. And there's a complete meal, and it's delicious, and it's amazing because, yeah.
It was so, I mean, that's once you've had Umbrian lentils,
Oh my gosh.
I now order them in bulk because it's one of
Yes.
like once you've had them and they're so tender and so flavorful and they're amazing. And
They
it's
were amazing.
they
Yes.
are. And it's it's one of those things where you think we've gotten so far away from the just the raw ingredients. And the
Yes,
more you get
exactly.
back to that, the better the food is.
The that is so true. The raw ingredients, the real food, the
Yeah.
beans, the legumes, the heirloom grains, the
Yeah.
vegetables, the seeds. If you can cook from those and not out of a package,
Yes.
the food is just so much better. It's like
Much better.
orgasmic. It's like, oh my God.
Yes. And it's it's funny because I've always been someone who loved food. Growing up, in a food instability in my household, I've always loved food. And one of my best friends growing up, her mom used to love to have me come visit because I would eat anything she made and I loved it. And so she would cook these beautiful dishes for me. And she was probably the first person that I ever saw unconditional love from. And she would make these beautiful meals because her kids would whine and complain and her husband was kind of apathetic. And I loved it. And
Mhm.
so I've always been a huge fan of meals that are made with real ingredients. And I didn't really realize that's what it was I loved about those meals. Part of it was going to Italy. I was like, oh my goodness, these are such simple, genuine ingredients. And you
Yes.
see what it is that's in the meal. It's not, there's no smoke and mirrors. I can remember we asked one of the chefs what's in something, and it was like 3 or 4 ingredients, and it was
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. It was so good. The potato soup, it was the potato onion soup that we had when we went truffle hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so creamy and so velvety and so flavorful. And she said it was like potatoes and onions and salt and pepper and something else. Came home, tried it. It is phenomenal. It's the best potato soup I've ever had. And we, like my kids, when we make it, like they scarf it down and they fight over whatever's left.
Mm-hmm.
You look at it, you're like, okay, that's such a simple recipe. And you don't need any of the additional, you don't need the dairy, you don't need any of the other stuff to make a really creamy, really healthy, incredibly delicious soup. It was so,
Right. And in the United States, if you're going to make potato soup, the recipe would have, and you would top it with bacon
yeah,
and cheddar cheese and
yeah,
sour cream and all these really unnecessary things. And you can't even taste anything. That's the thing in America, is that there's such a mishmash of flavors. I mean, just think about the burger. You put all this crap on the burger, you don't know what you're tasting at the end of the day.
yeah,
It's one big messy thing.
yeah,
And you can't really distinguish one thing from another in some ways. And in Italy, they have a very light hand. They really respect the quality of the ingredients,
yep,
and they almost caress the ingredients in a way, with love and
yeah,
just tenderness. So you're only adding a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And then you actually taste it. You taste the Umbrian lentils. I mean, it just sounds crazy to be talking about lentils in America when, why are
Yes.
we talking about Beyond Burger? And
Yes.
but,
Yes.
the lentils were what was orgasmic for me. I mean, because they are
Amazing.
so full of flavor. If they're treated with respect rather than just thought of as, oh, who wants to eat beans?
Yeah. Like
Uh,
I'm gonna eat 12 pounds of these because I need to get my protein in for today, and that's it.
yes.
So like, well, and the same thing with the I can't remember what they call it, but the dandelion greens.
Yes. Yeah.
It was olive oil, dandelion greens, garlic, salt, and pepper. And they were amazing, good quality olive oil is a game changer for a recipe.
Yes,
And
it really is. Yes.
oh, so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And they know their olive oil in
Yes,
Italy.
they do. Yes. And I thought I knew what olive oil was until I went to Italy and I was like, this is a whole different animal. I mean,
Yeah.
all of it, the lentils. I know I talked about the lentils already, but like game changer. It's
Hmm.
just totally different.
Yes. You don't need to invent a new food in a laboratory.
No.
You don't need all the, 30 ingredients in it to
Yes.
make something good.
Yes.
We really just need to go back to nature
Yes.
to learn how to eat the right foods and then prepare them in a way that really lets them shine.
Well, and I felt, yeah, it's funny because going to Italy for 2 weeks, I didn't realize how much eating just some of the prepackaged crap makes you feel until you eat really basic, really simple, very delicious meals. And I mean, in the mornings we had cornettos, so it was not like we were, eating completely healthy, but I felt so good those 2 weeks. It made a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people notice that. Even people that are gluten intolerant oftentimes say they go to Italy and they can eat pasta and they don't have any problems. So it really says something about, what are we doing to
Yes.
the food here in this country? And there was an article that came out, I think 50% of the American diet now, the average American diet consists of ultra processed food.
Mm.
And in some people's diets, it's up to 80%. So, if you ask a kid, where does food come from? Most kids will often say it comes from the store or comes in the package. They don't know that it grows from the ground and that you can eat vegetables from the ground. I mean, we've had kids at the farmed animal sanctuary that I founded. We have a vegetable garden. We have a permaculture vegetable garden. And we have had kids, we'll say, here, taste this. And they think they can't taste that vegetable from the garden. They're like, I can't taste that leaf. That grew. I mean, like they want it all sterilized and in a package before they can eat it, which is pretty
Sad.
remarkable. I mean, it has just changed. How we look at food has changed so quickly over the last 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, we weren't like that before.
No.
And so we're not helping ourselves. We are enriching the 10 biggest corporations in the world that control 70% of packaged foods. That's who we're enriching by embracing what they're giving us. They are controlling what we eat. And they make sure with, the ultra processed foods, there's a certain amount of fat, sugar, and salt in it so that you're sort of addicted to it.
Yeah.
And it's just like the pharmaceutical. It literally is no different from the pharmaceutical industry with whether it's fentanyl or whatever, these opiates. I mean, these foods are addictive and they make you feel a certain way. If your blood sugar is low or whatever, you eat something to feel good for a minute and then you go crashing down again and you're on this roller coaster all day long,
Yep.
or you're feeling kind of drugged all the time, like you don't have a clear head.
Yes.
um, and you can't really feel any sensation, whether it's joy or anything, because you're sort of drugged on all of these things. And there's a lot of ingredients that are considered GRAS, generally considered as safe, because they do some animal tests or whatever, but they're not foods that you would ever find in a kitchen.
Hmm.
They're not
Yes.
natural.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so, yeah, I mean, I really think the first rule of health is, look, if you can make it in a kitchen, it's probably okay. If you can't make it in a kitchen, probably best to avoid it. And then, of course, you can make French fry. You can make potato chips in a kitchen. I don't advise eating potato chips all the time either, but still, if you are going to eat potato chips, at least make them in your kitchen once in a while. So I'm
Well,
gonna have, yeah.
the- as a Southern girl, or I was born in the deep South and lived down there until I was, I don't know, 12 or 13. I love me some fried food, but I don't think anybody mistakes has the mistake of thinking that it's at all good for you. It's delicious, but it's not good for you. And when I travel down there, I feel awful. Like it's,
Oh, yes. No, no. I mean, I don't even think if you're eating it all the time, you don't even notice.
yes, no,
But like once in a while I'll eat something like tempura, something fried, deep fried, and it gives me brain fog.
yeah,
I don't know what it is, but after I've eaten it, I mean, it's delicious, but now I can't think straight for the next couple of hours. I just have this, I
I
don't
feel
know.
gross after.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
feel,
feel like I can feel it coming out my pores.
yes, yeah.
It's not good. So what is it that got you? Because it's funny because I don't know that I didn't know much about your views until I got a chance to meet you and starting to see your posts on social media. And I love that you are such a passionate activist. You're not just a businesswoman, you're not just living a vegan life, but you're also a passionate activist and an unapologetic one. You call people on their shit, just open and to the point. Have you always been that way?
I think I've always sort of been that way and have gotten into a lot of trouble for it from time to time.
Yeah.
And I think there was a period where I sort of scaled it back because I had to get along in the world and that sort of thing. But I am now in my mid 60s and I'm like, who cares? I don't care. But yes, I've been kind of I've been told that I am too direct, too bold for much of my life.
Yep.
But I did scale it back at one point. I mean, I don't call people out directly. That is not something that I do. But I will address a a situation that I think, need, like whether it's neoliberal capitalism or the way institutional investors treat founders or or um usually things in my sector. It's
Mhm.
strange that I generally don't call out the enemy. I mean, so for example, ranchers, like I would probably not be as harsh. And the reason is because I'm still trying to win them over.
Ah, interesting.
And so I have a different way of approaching them rather than, spitting in their face. I invite them to my dinner table to have conversation. And I've actually had ranchers at my dinner table. So, yeah, I might call out a big corporation like Tyson, but I probably would not call out an individual. I would be very clear about where I stand on animal agriculture, but I would do it in a way that would hopefully make them self-reflect.
Mm,
And it might not work the first time, it might not work the second time or the third time, but hopefully, I had a conversation with a rancher who, um, well, didn't want to be seen with me, so we met it in her truck somewhere. And she said, I have to be honest with you, I'm 65 years old, and the hardest thing for me is when the transport truck comes and I have to send my animals away.
yeah.
Just like you were talking about those cows, the steers that got shipped off to slaughter.
Yeah.
She confessed to me that this was now beginning to eat at her.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if she's ever going to go vegan. I mean, she doesn't have any, she was 65 at the time I talked to her. She's probably 70 now. That was her only livelihood. What was she going to do? Um, so, all she had was land.
Yeah.
She didn't have any other skills. She wasn't going to get a tech job. Hopefully she has Social Security, but at least she was thinking about it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not this life. I'm also Buddhist, so maybe it's the next life. She's born as a vegan. Who
Yeah.
knows? But, I think we have to try to show compassion where we can. So I will definitely speak out against systems of oppression, but not individuals.
That makes sense. Because it's hard. The biggest thing I have learned is that it is hard to step back and admit you were wrong when you're being attacked directly at it.
Yes.
When it's more of a, hey, look, let's work together to address this wrong together, then it's even personally, it's much easier to hear that message when it's not so much, this is what you're doing wrong and you suck, and more of a, this situation over here sucks. Do
What can
you
we do together?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it completely shifts the dynamic, it shifts the energy, it makes it less of a you versus me and more of a us together versus this. And we may come at it from completely different angles, but if we both look at it and say, this thing is either needs to change or is wrong, we can work together. And I think that, I it's interesting because when I originally announced the podcast, and that was at the prompting of a lot of my followers, and I was like, okay, what do you want me to talk about? Give me some topics. And one of the ones that I don't know how many vegans follow me, but I'm guessing it's not a huge number. Um, but the number of people that asked me to talk about veganism, talk about what made me shift, and that wanted to know more about it, was amazing to me and awesome because it means that they're curious, but they don't know who to ask. They don't know where to go to find out about it. And a lot of the vegans that are out there are in your face, if you're not 100% completely on the wagon, wholehearted vegan, then you are the enemy. And I know for me personally, it took me a while to get there. And I got there through gentle persuasion as opposed to being slapped across the face. You
Mhm.
know, I had to be at a place where I was able to take the message in. And
Yes.
so I think that there's a lot more curiosity about it. And it's one of the things when you're in marketing is that you hear over and over again. It takes people typically 5 to 6 exposures to a message before it starts to sink in.
Yes. Yeah,
So
I bet it's 7 to 10, but
yeah,
it's somewhere up there for
yeah.
sure.
And and who knows, mine was in the world of banking, so it may be the difference between banking, marketing. I don't know. But regardless, it takes repeated exposure to a message before it starts to sink in. And lots of times, you never know how deeply or how far your message will reach. You just have to keep putting it out there in enough different ways that it starts to resonate with people.
Yes. No, absolutely. I practice what I call inspirational activism. So yeah, I will call out systems of oppression, but at the same time, with individuals, I want to inspire them to be better beings, to be better versions of themselves, to empower them, to let them know that every single one of us has the power to have some sort of impact.
Yeah.
And I want to make veganism sexy and aspirational, so people want to join my club. It's like, hey, it's join this club, the vegan club. It's free membership and it's so fun. And one of the things is that we have these shared values
Yeah.
and we're all individuals.
Yes.
Yes, shared values. And because of that, you can find vegans all over the world with whom
Yeah.
you relate, that you can connect with. It's a wonderful feeling when you're not harming, when you're not hurting.
Yes.
Um, and just being able to show up at the table with that, I think lifts your mood. So you're
Yeah.
just happy. And the food tastes better because of that.
Well, and I mean, it's one of those things where you're so right. That community, I know so many people are so desperate for community. They talk about how like it is a public health crisis in America,
Yes.
the lack of community. The vegan community is amazing, and it's wonderful to sit down with a table full of vegans and know that you all have this shared commitment to empathy. And it's, it's like it's kind of this amazing like connection that you I know the first time I experienced it, I was not expecting that. I was expecting some great vegan food. I did not even take into consideration how we all were so closely aligned in our willingness to step out of our comfort zone in the pursuit of extending empathy to all animals. And it's really, really powerful, and it's really beautiful to be able to have a conversation with people and know that we all agree on that animals deserve to be treated fairly as well.
Yeah.
Um, and the other crazy thing, I mean, you look amazing for being, you said mid 60s,
66 and a half.
and your skin, like, you guys can see her skin is beautiful. I'm 48, and I still get carded. It's funny because anytime I go to a bar, and I don't do it often, but anytime I go to a bar, the bouncers will sit there and they'll be like, I know this is you, but I'm like, if I was to get a fake ID, why would I get one that said I was 48? I mean, I know I look younger. I don't look that much younger, but I do know that since I've gone vegan, my skin has gotten so much softer. It's cleared up. Like everything about me physiologically has improved since going vegan. And um, that was a big part of what helped me make that shift. I think I told you about the accident that I had 11 years ago now. And I ended up with chronic inflammation. And I stayed sick every single winter. I would get at a minimum bronchitis, but lots of times I would get pneumonia as well. And I would end up in the bed. I went to the emergency room a few times with it. Like every single winter, I got really sick, and I stayed sick year round. Whatever was going around, I caught. And I watched What the Health. And that was what was for me the initial tipping point. They were talking about the inflammation that happens anytime someone consumes an animal protein. And I was like, okay, I have tried so many medications to get rid of the inflammation. I've done an anti-inflammatory diet. I have done acupuncture. I have done so much physical therapy and chiropractic work. I've done yoga. I have done every single thing that I could think of to try. The steroid treatments were so tough on my system, but they kept giving me those to try to combat the inflammation. And I still am in so much pain that getting out of bed in the morning is brutal. My joints they were so stiff and they were so inflamed, and my body was on fire. And I saw that documentary, and I was like, you know what? What have I got to lose? I'll give it a month. If I get a month in and it's awful and I hate it because that's what I expected, no harm, no foul. You know what? I can go back to eating the same way I have, whatever. Within the first 2 days, I woke up and I experienced significantly less pain in my body. But I
What were
was
you eating? I'm assuming, I mean, you weren't, chowing down on vegan mac and cheese and hot
well,
dogs.
no, I did.
Yeah, really?
I
Okay.
initially was a junk food vegan because
Okay. And you still felt better.
I still felt better.
Wow.
Because I literally I had had the accident, and so I was still dealing with a whole lot of the head injury stuff and the chronic headaches and all that. So like I did not have it in me to do heavy duty cooking. All I did was I switched out cheese for vegan cheese, butter for vegan butter, milk for vegan milk, creamer, and I did I had two small kids, so it was vegan chicken nuggets and vegan hot dogs and like all of that crap because I needed to feed bodies, and I did not have the bandwidth to do anything significant.
And you still felt, well, there was a lot of inflammation already in meat and dairy,
Yes,
and as well, as well as things like pus and
yes,
antibiotics and hormones. And
yep.
so just by removing all of that, you probably had a reduction in inflammation.
It was amazing, and knock on wood, I haven't had pneumonia since. I haven't had bronchitis since. I caught COVID once, and that was on the way back from Italy last spring. And I got a very mild case of it. I was down for maybe 2 days, and I bounced right back. I wouldn't have even known and all of us. COVID went through us very quickly. We bounced right back. I wouldn't have known it was COVID, but I was testing Sterling for ballet, and they have a policy in place that if you've got a fever, and so I tested Sterling, and she tested positive. I was like, huh. And then I tested Ben. Ben was pretty much asymptomatic, but he was positive.
It's often are, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then I got it the next day, and I was like, oh man, here we go. Within 2 days, I was back on top again and did fine. And so I now eat a much more healthy diet. But the first couple of years, I was a junk food vegan because I did not have the bandwidth to be anything but. And I still saw a dramatic difference in my pain. The medications that I was taking went down. It has made a huge difference in my body. You know, people ask me if I've had work done, and I'm like, no, like it just, my entire system is so much healthier having made this shift. And so I am so grateful for it. It's my only regret in veganism is that I didn't go earlier.
Oh, I like to hear that. Well, that's really fantastic. I mean, I have to just balance that by saying, it's not a panacea. I mean, you can be vegan and still get cancer or heart disease or anything else. It's just that your risk just falls dramatically. But we do live in a very unhealthy planet right now. There's a lot of um, plastics, microplastics in our food, and there's a lot of unavoidable environmental things that unfortunately can impact us. But despite all of that, adopting a vegan diet, and especially if you can maintain a whole foods vegan diet, eating fresh fruits and vegetables and legumes and Umbrian lentils and things, yeah, you're going to be in much better position to tackle all of those environmental hazards that we're encountering. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's delicious. I mean,
it,
that's it's one of those things where I think about, I'm like, okay, why would I go back? It's delicious. I feel so much better.
mhm.
Everything in my body works better. And my kids stay super, super healthy. And anytime there's a bug going around, we get it from time to time, but it's always a light case of whatever we catch, and it's always there and gone with us.
Yes,
And
yeah,
that did not used to be the case.
yeah, no, absolutely. Um, it One thing that you touched upon is like it's delicious is people who aren't vegan often don't know how good vegan food can be.
Yes.
And what's really fun is I had a potluck here for Christmas with a local ladies group, and no one's vegan. Um, but they asked me to host it, so I said, yeah. But what you bring has to be vegan. And at first they're like, I don't know if we can do that. And then they're like, okay, we'll give it a try. And 35 women came, each bringing a dish, and they were all phenomenal. And what the women said to me were what they said things like, "Wow, I had no idea I would have so much fun looking up recipes.
Yes.
It made me think outside the box. I never thought I could do this with, this, that, or the other thing." Or they're like, "I didn't realize that this thing that I've been making all this time was already vegan."
Yeah.
People don't even think that, like, if you're, I don't know, it could be pasta pomodoro. That's already vegan, but a lot of people don't think that it is, because people think that a vegan food has to have some vegan meat in it or something, and it doesn't. I mean, vegan just
Yeah.
means you use meat, dairy, or eggs, but there's so many things that are naturally vegan. And when you go down that rabbit hole of looking for recipes online, like these ladies did, they said they had so much fun because they began to expand their horizon, and they didn't realize there were so many different ways of preparing food that they had never considered before. Because I think most people are just stuck in a rut. They eat the same food day in and day out. It's the same method of preparation. And so when you are forced to do something like this, it's like, oh my God, the world just opens up.
Yep.
And people say they become better cooks, that
Yes.
they're eating better, that their taste buds have expanded. The world opens up because all of a sudden you're exploring.
Well, and it's funny that you say that. I used to hate cooking with a passion. I hated cooking. And going vegan, I have so much fun with it now because it is fun to explore new ways to accomplish what it is that you want to do and to go out and research it. And I always joke that vegans have a chip on our shoulders because
Yes.
everyone assumes that vegan cooking is bad. We go above and beyond. And
We do, we do. It's better than,
yeah,
I mean, I've got 3 kids, they're adults now, but let me just say, I've been to my share of school potlucks. And the food is usually pretty ordinary. I mean, you got like one fried chicken dish after another,
yep,
or a potato salad. It's not original. It's not creative. It's just like the same old bland, boring food. And I would usually come up with something that was pretty unique, and or it's not, I never announced it was vegan or anything. I just put it down and people go, oh my God, what is that? That looks so delicious. Oh my God, what is this? And, I was like the only vegan dish, but it was the best. And it was the thing that always disappeared. Like, everyone
yep.
ate whatever I brought completely clean. And so it really is true. It's like we're better cooks. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Vegans are better cooks for the most part.
I agree. And because it isn't just that we are cooking for vegans, we're also cooking to dispel that assumption that vegans
Yes,
eat garbage. And so,
that's right.
it's like we've got something to prove and it's fun. It is so
Yes.
fun to play around with ingredients and do that alchemy of, oh, is this going to turn out the way I want? Turning my old family Southern recipes into vegan varieties has been amazing. And my biscuits and gravy recipe, I have fed to plenty of omnivores, and they have said time and again, this is the best biscuits and gravy I've ever had. And I'm like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, veganizing recipes is really, really fun to show. I mean, that was really why, I started writing cookbooks back in the early, late 1980s, early 90s. It was like and I was really into French food, and I had worked my way through mastering the art of French cooking, Julia Child, and I had tried to vegetarianize or veganize everything in there. Initially, it was vegetarianized because I was still eating cheese, and then it was just veganizing it all. And I wrote my first cookbook because I wanted to dispel the notion that, vegans only ate grass.
Yes.
So I wanted to show, yeah, you can have a French style vol au vent with cream mushrooms. You can have, a pate en croûte. Um, I made lots of like 1980s style French dishes. So, I mean, things that people don't eat anymore, but I had like an aspic terrine in my first cookbook, so it was kind of funny. But the point was, I wanted to prove that you could create these
Yeah.
beautiful, delicious,
Yes.
unctuous dishes that
Yeah.
didn't have meat or dairy in it. And so, yeah, we were, I think we're all sort of on a mission to prove that. And one of the best forms of activism, I think, is make some delicious vegan cookies and take them to your neighbor next door. Like share the love, invite your neighbors over for dinner, and just serve them great food. Is I don't think most people care if there's meat in, I mean, very few people actually care if there's meat in a dish or dairy in a dish. They just want delicious food.
Yes.
And the more we can prove that this stuff is damn delicious, the more converts we're going to get.
Well, and veganism is sexy. It is
It is
a
sexy.
sensual
Yes.
exploration of ingredients. It
Mm.
is so much more, when you really connect with a mission, when you really connect with the fact that you don't want to eat death any longer, it
Yes,
becomes a whole body experience.
it
And it
is.
becomes
Yes.
about losing yourself in the textures. And especially when you're trying to replicate something that you used to eat and used to love,
Right.
it is about really digging into ingredients and playing with the textures and playing with the flavors and getting that umami kicking and getting whatever the palate layers are. That's sexy.
It
And
is sexy.
it
Yeah,
is
I agree.
sexy.
Yes. I think, yeah, vegans are sexy. Vegans are sexy and fun
Absolutely. Because you
and
take that approach to
passionate.
everything. You take that approach to everything. And
Yes.
you're absolutely right. The amount of passion that it takes to make a huge shift like that. And you apply that to everything in life. And that is every time I meet a vegan, there's like that whole extra, like, I don't know what it is, but that just like that zhuzh in them. And you're like,
Yeah, je ne sais pas. I mean, you
exactly.
wake up in the morning knowing that you're dedicated to something.
Yes.
Rather than you wake
Yeah.
up in the morning, it's like, oh my God, I got to get through another day.
Yeah.
And so you have something to live for.
Yep.
Uh, and that keeps you going, I mean, sure, vegans get depressed. It's not like, we all have perfect lives and then, that you never get depressed or anything like that. You can, but we're human.
Yeah.
So we're going to have our ups and downs. But I would say because we have a sense of purpose.
Yep.
That keeps us going. And the sense of purpose isn't, about God is going to save me, but it's about what I can do for
Yeah.
others. That's the difference. It's not like I believe in Christ because I want to go to heaven. It's about, well, it's actually very Christ-like. I'm here to help others. I'm here to help other animals and to help other people see that as well.
How do I
And
make the world around me a better place?
that's right. So we wake up with a sense of purpose of giving,
Yeah.
of help.
Yes.
It's not about me, me, me.
Yeah. I love that. That is awesome. And that is so very true. And it feels good. It feels good to make choices that give something else its quality of life back.
Yes.
It feels good to be part of something like that. And it's not about, I hear a lot that vegans are so sanctimonious, and it's not about that.
No.
It's not about me pointing my finger. I don't want to point my finger at someone else and be like, "Oh, you're gross. Oh, you're disgusting." It's not it. It's that I'm so passionate about what I'm doing that, like, it's hard not to share that.
With others.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But thank you so much for this.
Oh, it was fun. It was a fun little chat.
I love it. I'm having so much fun with these interviews because it is amazing how many people have got really insightful stories and really great information to share. And it's fun to talk about it, and it's fun to give insights, and it's always fun to talk with you. So this was awesome.
Well, great, Caroline. It was great seeing you again. And yeah, wish you well on your podcasts.
Thank you. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Caroline's Adventure podcast. While you're here, subscribe to the show so you're the first to catch new episodes when they're released. And if you enjoyed hanging out with me today, please leave a 5-star rating. For links to social media and more content, visit the description for this episode or go to carolinesadventure.com. That's Caroline with 2 A's, adventure.com.